I think it's more so like they don't want to have their identity erased and lumped together with one. Like, as I stated earlier, it's culture. You're taking someone who is someone from, like, let's say Ghana or Kenya or something, and how they were probably raised a lot differently than people over here in, like, Detroit, Southside Chicago, or you mean like, or like not even places like that, or like Lawrenceville, Georgia.
In the 1960s, the Civil Rights Movement gave African Americans the right to become integrated into mainstream society, and since then there have been huge changes in how society views this group that had been oppressed for so long. Because this change is still relatively recent, there are still some bridges that need to be crossed, but as a whole, circumstances are much better now than they were in the past. But there seems to be a new issue that Americans are facing, and that is the difference between Black immigrants and African Americans.
Yeah, I definitely do, because I mean, you got to think of like culture aspect of it. African Americans are going to grow up a lot differently than people who are, Afro Caribbean, or Afro Latino, or Afro, just from like Africa itself. It's just basically about culture over there and culture over here.
After doing research on this topic, I found that people just don't understand that there is a background difference between the two groups. Yes, to the naked eye, people of color look relatively alike, but it's more than just skin. And it's even deeper than where their family comes from, or like place of birth. It's like embedded in their DNA of the cultures. Like these two groups are very different and deserve respect on both ends. There has to be a light shine on this issue and how it's affecting both sides. First is a lack of knowledge on identifying someone as their ethnicity instead of just labeling every Black person as African American.
What causes a rift between African Americans and Black immigrants is the fact that the umbrella term African American or Black American, this term erases everything from these people. They don't give them the respect of their culture. And you're basically pairing the two because they look similar, but they're not similar at all.
People will argue and say that because there's a vast range of races and ethnicities that it's okay to not be fully educated on the subject, but is it okay to be completely ignorant on it too? In the United States alone, it's astounding how little people will go out of the way and read history that is outside of a textbook, that they just stick with what they're given in school and go with it, and they don't try to research it on their own, but then they sit and wonder why people get offended, not realizing that it's out of their own ignorance. The history of one's culture and community can impact more than just that group of people. When the United States sent people off Earth and onto another planet, landing on the moon and claiming the winner of the space race, the American people were brought together. In spite of political, racial, and social class and backgrounds, Americans rallied behind their mission and rooted for their team. In the same way we can rally behind that, we should rally behind history. By knowing the history of a subject, you can connect people with that subject, and even though you won't be able to feel what they felt, you can sympathize with them on a different level.
I think, like, I'm not saying go over there knowing every single culture that they have, like knowing that the dances over there, knowing the language, but I mean make an attempt to know, like, just general things, like, oh, just knowing, like asking for directions, or more so just knowing what's acceptable to do. So like,
but what if research in history is not exactly your thing? If you don't like to read out of textbooks or read useless web pages with terrible pictures and so many words you can drown in them, there is a solution. Candace Watts Smith wrote a brilliant book about the difference between Black immigrants and African Americans. In her book, Black Mosaic, The Politics on Black Pan-Ethnic Diversity, Smith gives her personal account from college about encountering different cultures and the reactions that African Americans, who at times looked down on her for being from Chicago. It could be said that if everyone brushed up on their history, we wouldn't face these problems, and if everyone was considerate and did not settle to be ignorant on the issue, then it would be one that had to be discussed. But the truth is that people aren't going to enjoy history all the time. Candace Smith has made a way for us to hear her personal account on this issue and to shed a light on it that is much needed. And this topic isn't just going to die down. W. Du Bois once said that the color line belts the world. And this means that we are always going to be constricted by color if we don't get a hold of it now. When he was talking about it, he was talking about the civil rights movement, but now he's talking about, now it applies to where the color line belt is the border. And us as in the world and like the United States, if people from a different country come over, they're not educated, but we also just see them as a forefront, or we just look and see who they are by the color of their skin, and we can't keep doing that. It's not going to go away, and we need to be educated. And even if it is just reading Candace's book and knowing and having that education of there is a difference between the two, that not every American who is black is African American, and having and being comfortable in the subject and knowing that it's okay to ask where someone's from, or it's okay to get into that discussion with them because it's showing them respect and giving them their culture and not stripping it away from them and just generalizing.
Means we're recording.
Okay.